middle of the world. It's been a while since I last vlogged, and that is because I have a life. I have a lot of things to do, and so no, to be honest, it's because I didn't really have anything to vlog about. This is gonna be a review of the documentary film on Netflix, Abducted in Plain Sight. It is a documentary about a woman's experience with child abduction and sexual abuse. So it's going to be dealing with some difficult topics. So if you are triggered by any of these topics, don't watch this video. But what I really wanted to do was kind of offer a review of this documentary film because it was so shocking to me, and it was to a lot of other people. And I just want to discuss these issues because it really bothered me that these things were happening. Recently, I got really into true crime. I'm a huge fan of BuzzFeed Unsolved, but I got into darker stuff, so I was listening to the podcast Sword and Scale, Dirty John, Dr. Death, and Wine and Crime. On Netflix, I was also watching Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, Inside the Criminal Mind, Evil Genius, Making a Murderer. And so I've been watching a lot of true crime with a special focus on serial killers because my whole life I've always been terrified of being a victim of a serial killer. And so my way of coping with that is to try to get inside their mind and try to understand how they operate and why they operate. There's an old saying that goes, we fear what we do not understand. Therefore, I want to understand as many of the things that I fear so that I don't have to fear them anymore, and I can feel like I'm knowledgeable to some extent. And so Netflix recommended me this film, Abducted in Plain Sight, because of all the other shit I've been watching that's really dark. And I gotta say, this story is not the darkest story I've ever heard. I mean, it's pretty mild in terms of the sexual predator. This pedophile wasn't necessarily sadistic. My indignation here is really with the parents of this child, and you're gonna understand why once I start breaking down what happens. This is full of spoiler alerts. It's for people that have seen this film and felt the way that I felt and thought the things that I was thinking. But if you haven't seen it, go watch it. So this is where it all begins. It's a normal, typical American family. They're living in, you know, the suburbs, Midwest. The predator, they meet at church, which is of course very common because church offers access to children, and church kind of acts as this mirage where you just automatically assume that the people at the church are qualified or have been background checked just because they have faith, just because they're people of faith. So it's of course a very easy target for pedophiles. So if you take your children to church, just know that church is a harboring ground for pedophiles because they have access to children from parents that wholeheartedly trust the person in power at the church, whether it be a priest or a youth counselor or whatever. They just automatically assume that they're good people because they go to church, which is obviously a fallacy. But anyway, let's go back to the story. So they meet him and his family at church. They really like this family. They start hanging out a lot. The dude, we'll call him B because that's what they call him, B gets really into their older daughter, Jan. So he loves all kids, but this particular child, Jan, he just thinks is super special. So he treats her better than everybody else. He has kids too, by the way, and he's married. So this is where it gets weird. Red flag number one. He wants to take Jan on a horseback riding trip. Just him and her. The parents agree for that to happen, which is of course unacceptable. I would never let that happen, ever. Jan gets abducted that night when they go horseback riding. She basically doesn't come back for 5 days. Now, the parents, when they notice that they're not back yet, they wait 2 days before they call the police because they don't want to upset the family that they're friends with, the family of this guy that they've befriended at church. So they wait 2 days. They don't want to upset them. They call the FBI on Saturday. This happens on Thursday. They call the FBI on Saturday. The FBI says, we're closed. Call 911. and they don't want to call emergency because they don't want to make a big deal. Your child is missing and you don't want to make a big deal. There are parents that freak the fuck out when their child goes missing for like 2-3 hours. These parents, they waited the entire weekend. They call on Monday, and that is when the FBI gets involved. Now, what the fuck is happening, I want to know, with his wife and his kids? Because their dad just went missing for 5 fucking days. How is that okay? The FBI comes and talks to Jan's parents. The agent has to tell the parents that their child has been kidnapped. Because they don't know that the child has been kidnapped. They just think, oh, they went on a trip without telling us. And the FBI is like, no. She's kidnapped. That is how stupid these parents are. Now, obviously, it's a very painful story. The whole family feels really bad about it. But I'm not going to be apologetic. I'm going to call things straight out for what they are. And this is complete bullshit. They're really fucking stupid. And by the way, I have my notes. Like, primer impacto over here. I'm just like spitting out facts. Okay, so the brother of B, I forgot his name. So much for having facts. The brother jumps into the documentary at this point and says, yes, my brother is a pedophile. I've known that he's a pedophile my whole life. When he was 12 years old, he molested our half-sister, who was 6. After this whole thing is over, we find them. He says that they were kidnapped, whatever. Nothing happens, right? Nothing happens. He's still very close to the kid, Jan, and Jan likes him. So they go boating with another neighbor. So it's Jan, B, and another neighbor. And Jan's parents are not there. What the fuck? What is wrong with them? The neighbor that goes with them is like, nope, this is too weird. I don't want to hang out with you anymore. Because he saw how he interacted with this child on this boating trip. This child that was their neighbor. And he was like, nope, you are canceled. I don't want to talk to you B anymore. Because he saw. So then, on another occasion, they take Jan camping with them. Without her family. They just take her. Why are they letting him take her so much? He takes her camping. She wakes up in the middle of the night and her panties are off. And he's lying next to her. Touching her. And she's still like, whatever. My mom taught me from like age 4 that everybody's a sexual predator and that everybody wants to rape me. And call that overprotective or paranoid, but I think that's the correct way to raise a child, is by telling them not to trust anybody, not family members, not teachers, professors, coaches, church members. Nobody is to be completely trusted, because everybody can have hidden intentions. And so if somebody does something to you, you have to tell your mom. Well, that's what my mom told me. Like, tell me if anybody does anything at all that makes you uncomfortable. This is what this child should have been told. And this wouldn't have gotten as bad as it was. They take her on another trip. Alone. Her parents let her go to Seattle with this fucking pedophile and his family. But he takes her away from his family by drugging her and saying that she's sick and that she has to go to bed. And he takes her to a motel room where he possibly rapes her. We don't really know if he rapes her because she was asleep. I mean, drugged. So she doesn't know what happens. But she knows that when she woke up, he was naked. So probably this is when he raped her the first time. He starts romancing Jan's mom. He starts calling her. They start hanging out. They make out. They go to second base. Mind you that he just had sex with her daughter. And this woman is... God, I can't fucking stand her. So then, after this happens, he goes to Jan's dad, whose name is Bob, and he goes, hey Bob, I'm sexually frustrated. My wife, I can't stand that bitch, and I want to have sex. This is a church-going guy, dude. This is like, you should not be... Anyway, he says to Bob, I'm sexually frustrated. And then Bob looks over and B has a boner. And B is like, can you jack me off? And he does it. So now the parents of this girl who has been raped by this pedophile, they're both giving sexual favors to the pedophile that's been raping her. At this point, the church reprimands him because he's been acting weird with a different kid. So they send him to therapy. They don't fire him, they don't ban him, they send him to therapy because that's what church people do. They just forgive everybody. They're like, yeah, you can still have access to the kids, just go to therapy. So he goes to therapy, and he comes back to Jan's family, to her mom and her dad, and he says, I found out at therapy that the reason why I'm a pedophile, he doesn't say that, but he's like, the reason why I have these issues is because I was raped at 4 years old by my aunt. And now, in order to overcome this, I have to spend time alone with your daughters. And this means laying down next to Jan while she's asleep, laying down next to her. And this is what they say in the documentary. The mom and the dad are not comfortable with this, but they still say yes because it's for his therapy. They prioritize his therapy over the safety of their daughter. Why? He's not even your friend, he's not even your family, and yet he still comes first. So this dude has these fake tapes that he has to listen to while laying next to her every night. And the tapes are really creepy. They say things like, she's caressing you and it feels so good. And he has to listen to this. And also he has to give her vitamins, which are sleeping pills. So he gives her vitamins every time. Now at this point in the documentary, they call the parents gullible and naive. I don't think they're gullible and naive. I think they're straight up fucking stupid. 4 times a week, he's doing this, sleeping next to her for 6 months. Just imagine that. Your neighbor is coming over, who's a pedophile, is coming over and sleeping next to your daughter while she's asleep 4 times a week for 6 months. Unbelievable. So then he abducts her. He takes her to Mexico. This is where he gets weird because he basically brainwashes her into thinking that she's an alien and that she has to have his baby in order for the world not to end. At this point, he's 40 and she's 12. And in order to have his baby, she has to have sex with him. So while in Mexico, they're having sex. She's 12, he's 40, and they are there for 35 days until he calls his brother and he's like, hey brother, I want to take Jan back to the US, but I cannot do so until her parents agree to let her marry me. Because we're already married in Mexico, which, by the way, you can apparently marry girls at 12 years old in Mexico. I didn't fucking know that. At least back in the 70s, you could. So the brother calls the parents. He says, you know, he married her. He wants to bring her back, but he cannot do so until you agree to let her marry him. And the parents are like, no, we're never going to allow that to happen. Okay, but okay, anyway. The brother betrays him. He calls the FBI. They tap the call. They find them in Mexico. And they bring her back. She's, of course, told not to say anything. She doesn't say anything. She wholeheartedly believes that she is an alien and that she has to have his baby for the world not to end. The FBI agent tells the parents to stay away from B and his family. Don't talk to them. Don't look at them. No contact. But they don't listen. So once B is facing legal trouble because of kidnapping charges, not rape charges, because they don't know that he raped her. And she didn't break her hymen, so they don't know that he raped her. His wife makes an affidavit saying, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but, you know, a letter saying that basically they want to drop charges and that Jan had permission to go to Mexico with him and that, you know, they don't want to hold him accountable. And the parents sign it. They signed this letter saying that they should let B go and that they don't want to go to court and they don't want him to face charges because he would release information about Jan's mom had cheated on her dad with B, and the family chose to cover their own ass instead of saving their daughter from this predator. Just think about that for a second. It was more important to them that the people didn't know that the wife had cheated on her husband with B. That was more important than putting this man behind bars. Okay, so they're like, nope, we don't want to go to trial. Let him go. The entire court justice system is like, what is wrong with you? We're gonna try him anyway. We don't care what you, like, why would you do this? He has to go to trial, but now the girl's family is not gonna testify. So basically the state has no case and they don't pursue it because nobody wants to be a witness. He's still going to church. People are still praising him like, hey, you're doing good. Keep trying. He breaks into her room one night. And of course they have sex. At this point, their relationship is sexual. Every time they're seeing each other, they're having sex. He somehow starts sending her notes at school. I don't know how, but somehow. And they start writing each other love letters. So at this point, she is in love with him. She is in love with this man. He's no longer like her friend. She wants to be his wife. B starts calling the mom, whose name is Marianne. Jan's mom is Marianne, so he starts calling Marianne, and Marianne is like, why did you marry my daughter? Why did you marry my daughter? Not, fuck you, don't talk to me, you son of a fucking piece of shit. She says, why did you marry my daughter? If somebody had married my daughter in Mexico by abducting her while she was 12 years old, I wouldn't be answering the phone to them. I would probably be in jail because I beat them to death. I can't believe these people. B starts telling Marianne, the mom, that he loves her and that they can have a life together if she gets divorced. Where the fuck is his wife in all this? Like, shouldn't she be keeping her pedophile under control? So they start making out, they start having sex. He starts having a sexual relationship with the mother of the child he's sexually abusing. From another perspective, if you're the woman, you are having sex with the predator that is raping your daughter. What the fuck? So then B tells Bob, hey, your wife is sleeping with me. And this happens for 8 months. They sleep together for 8 months. Marianne says on the documentary that she was in love with him. Think about that for a second. She was in love with him. How can you ever be in love with the person who has kidnapped your daughter twice? You don't have to be a genius to figure out that something sexual probably happened during those 2 abductions. For one of them, she was gone for a month. So if you can't figure it out, then God. During their dating thing, B sees Marianne 11 times. And 9 out of those 11 times, he has access to Jan. Twice from those encounters, he sleeps alone with her. The mom somehow allows him to sleep with his daughter alone. I wouldn't let my daughter sleep with a stranger with me there, but she's letting him do it unobserved, even though he's abducted the daughter twice. Give me a fucking break, woman. So Bob wants to divorce her. He's like, he sees through it. He sees that this man is only fucking his wife so that he can fuck his daughter. At this point, they don't know that they're raping the daughter, but he knows that he wants access to her, so he divorces the wife, and he asks her to leave the house because she's putting the kids in danger. When he announces a divorce, he says that is the hardest day of his life, when he has to divorce his wife. And when he tells his daughters, one of them says that that was the hardest, like, that was the saddest thing in the world. I would rather divorce somebody than find out that my child has been molested by somebody. That is definitely not the worst day of my life, the divorcing somebody. That is not the worst day of my life. If your daughter has been abducted, that probably should have been the worst day of your life, not the day you have to divorce your wife. And same thing for the sister. How can that be so hard? Your sister is being raped and you say that your parents divorcing is the hardest thing? Okay. B wants Marianne to have custody of Jan. He says that she will get custody because Bob is a homosexual. Because remember, he jacked him off. So he's trying to use that against him. Finally, the couple sees through his bullshit that he's just doing this to split them up so that he can have basically custody of Jan. They get back together because they're both so stupid. So of course they belong together. And they don't get divorced. So B gets sentenced for something for 5 years. I don't know what. Probably the kidnapping. And he only spends 45 days. So he gets out of jail. He moves to Wyoming. And Jan wants to go see him. And the parents are like, no, you cannot go see him. Now, at this point, her family says that she was making decisions all on her own. And she was rebellious and whatever. Yeah, I would be too. If my parents let a strange man come into my life and do whatever the fuck he wanted with me, then I would be calling the shots too, because at this point, this girl has become a woman. Okay, she's had sexual relationships with an older man. She thinks she's a woman because you allowed that to happen. So of course she's calling all the shots. He calls Marianne, the mom, and says that Jan is gonna come anyway whether you let her or not. She said she's gonna run away, so you might as well let her come. And the mom puts Jan on a plane to him because from her point of view, she was going to go anyway, so might as well let her go safely, which is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's recap. Your daughter was abducted by this man who married her at the age of 12. And you're putting her on a plane because she wants to go see him? How about you whoop her ass, you lock her in her room, you do whatever you need to do, but you don't put her on a plane? Like, what the fuck? She spends 2 weeks there. And of course they're having sex these entire 2 weeks. She's like 12 or 13. Okay. B tells Jan that he and Gail are getting divorced, which I don't know where the fuck Gail was this entire time that her husband has been sleeping with everybody, because, I mean, finally they're gonna divorce, but where was she before, you know? Why didn't she divorce him before when he was abducting children or sleeping with Marianne? The brother sees B and says that he's happier than ever being those 2 weeks with Jan. B returns her, sends her back home on a plane, and B starts calling her mom again, telling her that he's gonna that he's gonna take Jan to Africa because they love each other and they're never gonna see her daughter again. And the mom is like, leave us alone. She doesn't put a restraining order. She doesn't record these phone calls or anything like it. She just says, leave us alone, please. You've already done too much. Why are you still answering the phone? Why are you still in this? Like, why don't you move? This is so stupid. He's literally threatening to take her away and you're never going to see her again. And you're still being so polite to him, saying, please leave us alone. Like, fuck you. Okay, we're almost at the end. So then Jan, remember, she's madly in love with this man at this point because she lost her virginity to him. She thinks that she's an alien and that she has to have his baby in order to save the world. So she's completely in love with him. She writes a runaway note and they don't see her for several months. B keeps calling her mom and they play the recordings, and these are super chill phone calls. Like, you wouldn't even know that something tragic has happened because she answers the phone like, hi B, hello B. Like he's an old friend, and what the fuck? She shouldn't be answering his phone calls at this point. She asks him, do you still want to marry Jan? And then he says, yes, I want to marry Jan. I love her. Does she still want to marry you? And it's like, you're talking about a child who's disappeared. You shouldn't be this calm. You shouldn't be this, does she want to marry you? Like, woman, God. B tells the mom that she's been selling drugs and being a prostitute in order to survive, which is a total lie. But when he tells her this, the mom says, oh dear. And she just kind of goes like, oh, I can't with this woman. So then Jan calls home and she's like, I'm fine. And she has the sweetest voice. So I totally believe that she's obviously not a prostitute. Because the way she talks to her family is like, I'm fine, I'm good, and she has such a sweet voice. So of course she's actually at a Catholic girls' school where B left her and where he's paying for her tuition or whatever. Eventually the FBI catches the phone calls and they find her at this Catholic girls' school. They bring her back. She's pissed. B had made death threats to Bob, the father. He burned down his shop. And basically he's doing all this crazy shit, and the parents are still not recording it, still not filing a restraining order. Nothing. Just nothing. Just saying, please leave us alone. Finally, Jan is growing up. She wants to go on a trip with her friends, which is, by the way, the first trip of her life where she's not being molested by somebody. This is the first time her parents let her go somewhere where she won't be molested. Think about that. Once she's away, she starts growing up. She starts discovering that the aliens thing was a lie. She tells her parents. And this is the first time she tells them about the sex. Which, in my opinion, if somebody kidnaps your daughter and marries her and has her for a month, you best believe my first assumption is going to be that he raped her. But no, these people have to wait until Jan comes through years later and says that she was raped, when this was obvious from the beginning. From like day one. So eventually the mom, you know, she feels really bad. She writes a book about it, which is kind of like her redemption, but in my opinion, woman, So they write a book about it, and B starts showing up at the book reading saying that Jan willingly went to Mexico with him, even though that is still rape because she's still a minor. But he tries to make it better by saying that she wanted to go and that her parents let her go, which is still rape. Still rape. Even if they signed permission, still rape. He also says that her parents were pimping her out in order to get sexual favors from B. Eventually, they finally put a restraining order on him for life. And he shows up at another book reading where the BACA is, which is the Bikers Against Child Abuse. So they're there at her event, and he shows up and he starts fighting with them, and he gets arrested, and they find out that he had a gun. So he violated the restriction order, and so they send him to jail. And he doesn't want to go to jail, so he kills himself. So that is how the story ends. The saddest thing is that this could have all been avoided if they had never allowed a stranger to get close to their daughter. It's not that hard, people. Everybody can be a sexual predator out there, and so never be shocked. Never be shocked. There is absolutely no one that you should deem a saint or incapable of sexual abuse. The best thing you can teach your children is to be alert and not fully trust anybody with their bodies. If the family had done this, this would have never happened. If the family had seen, hey, this man is getting too close to our daughters, let's put an end to it, none of this would have happened. It would have been so easily avoided since day one. And that is why I'm pissed. I'm sorry that they had to go through this. I'm sorry that Jan had to go through this, but I wholeheartedly believe that her parents offered her up on a silver platter to this man. And that is why this happened to her, because her parents allowed it to happen. Rant over. I'm done.